Welcome to the Well Off Podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. I'm your host, George Almasri. Darcy White is a real estate entrepreneur that has founded 3 investment companies, and they operate in 4 Canadian provinces. Although he's based from the West Coast, he actually spent a lot of time investing in Windsor, Ontario. And on this episode, we broke down and went into detail on his 69-unit building acquisition in Windsor, the kind of struggles that he had, the vacancies, the troublemakers that were in the building, how he was able to completely turn that place around, and the satisfaction from knowing that he had a positive impact on the community. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this if you are looking for a story of someone who had to go through some serious challenges. And, sometimes we think that our duplexes and triplexes have their issues. And obviously, everyone's situation is a little different. But when you get to a scale of a 69-unit building and having to address so many different problems, it really makes you feel like your problems aren't as substantial, really. So make sure to share this with a friend or family member. We want to get the word out there. We want more people to hear this content so that we can inspire people to become well off through real estate and to do really well and just take that first step to succeed in their lives and financially, I should say. So your support's appreciated. Make sure to leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening to. And if you want to connect with me to talk about some off-market multi-unit opportunities that we have in the Golden Horseshoe right now, then you can book a call. Just go to www.welloff.ca and you can find the area there to book a call and connect with me. So there you go. Enjoy the episode. All right. I'm here with Darcy White. Darcy, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I don't do very many of these, so forgive me if I'm not very polished.
No, that's okay. So from my understanding, you live on the West Coast, or I guess, is it in Vancouver?
Just outside of Vancouver. We're out in the Fraser Valley in Langley, but yeah. But my business is not here. I'd like to say I have nothing in the 604 area code.
Mm-hmm. Seems to be a very common thing for people that live out there.
Yeah. The price of real estate here is dislocated from reality in some ways, or it's sorry, that's not true. The price is what the price is, right? A motivated vendor, a motivated seller. That's what's transacting out here. And if you're in the GTA, in the 416 or the 905, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. There's different market forces at play, whether it's immigration, whether it's a limitation on land, a border. We've got all of them here. We've got mountains to the north, ocean to the west, the U.S. border to the south, significant in-migration from the Pacific Rim and other parts of the world, beautiful climate, mild weather, and a limited landscape. We've got 2 rivers running right through the middle of our city, or inlets. There's limited land space. There's agricultural land reserves. So what the prices are is a product of all of those forces coming together and a realization of, what land values are and the cost of construction. So yeah, real estate plays here are converting it from one thing to another. They're mostly a conversion of into multi-residential, or from single-family homes into multi-units. Mm-hmm. And that's a deep pockets game, and one I don't choose to play.
Right. Well, we'll dive into that very soon, but I just wanted to start off, as I usually do, by asking you about your childhood. So you just want to tell me where you grew up and a couple memories you have.
Okay. That's great. I was born in Regina, traveling between a farm south of Regina and city of Regina. But my father was a product of the 1950s and 60s and 70s, so I was born in the 60s. Actually, at the ultimate moment of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Friday afternoon, October 26th, 1962. So we moved all over the place. I went to, by my count, 13 different schools in 7 different communities. So I lived in Regina, Fort McMurray, Port Hardy, Golden, Maple Ridge, all other places in between there, different homes. So Calgary. And my father was an electrician, and he followed the building of the West, the explosion of mills and mines and oil fields, and so construction in the West. So we traveled a lot wherever the work was. So I had a kind of peripatetic lifestyle. But I do say, while I was born in Regina, home for me is on the unceded lands of the northern Vancouver Island, the Kwakwatl people. I grew up substantially in Port Hardy. and that is what feels like home for me. So
Hmm.
when I think of home, it's north end of the island. It's a lot of rain, 250 days of rain a year, very little sunshine, cool climate, big trees, small, tiny houses that are rotting into the ground from all the humidity. But
Hmm.
for the most part, the last 25 years, I've lived in Vancouver or just outside of Vancouver. So a lot of places. I've lived
Yeah.
in Toronto too for 6 years. I did my undergraduate degree in literature and education there. My wife was with the Toronto or with the Canadian Opera Company as an opera singer. So we lived in Toronto for almost 6 years.
Hmm.
Loved it there. For all the Toronto listeners, I got no complaints. I'm a Leaf fan. Once the Canucks are out of the playoffs, which they usually are, then I'm a Leafs fan. So there we
Yeah.
go.
Well, who goes up first, the Leafs or the Canucks?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. It's brutal.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
hard being a hockey fan in Canada.
Yep, that's for sure. So let's talk a little bit about your journey now as an investor. Just
Yeah.
kind of walk us through how you got started, just briefly, and tell us about that side of your
Yeah.
story.
Toronto's relevant because I was teaching school for the Toronto District School Board. I was at Birchmont and Eglinton, teaching at General Career Elementary School. Loved it. Loved coaching, loved teaching, loved every part of it. But my father-in-law was a developer. He had had a career through the Western provinces, building shopping centers, building them, leasing them up, and then selling them and retaining an equity portion, but selling them to European pension funds. It was a really great business, but he had the double misfortune of getting old and having health concerns. I have five brothers-in-law, and I just assumed one of them would take over the business. That wasn't the case. And in 1999, he approached me and said, "Would you be willing to?" And I thought about it, and I love teaching. I love Toronto. I loved our place in East York. Um, but I gave it some thought, and between my wife and I, we decided that we'd make a change. I like the challenge. I was interested in, seeing what I could do if the shackles were off. Being a teacher is a creative and a beautiful and a great career, but you are limited in what you earn by a prescribed union agreement with this province. You're prescribed outcomes, what you can teach, how long you can work, how far you can succeed, what you could do. There are certain limitations that I want to explore what I could do beyond that. So I took over managing a small portfolio of privately held properties. I converted them into a company. Um, they need, in some case, they need fresh capitalization and some fresh energy. My father-in-law was in his middle 60s by then, and I have an overabundance of energy. So it was a great bone for me to chew on for about 5 years to improve those properties and make some changes. I love the business so much that I started investing. Like many of your listeners, probably, I started with single units condos. I bought three condos in Langley City. I noticed that the rental rates were low. The vacancy rate had been dropping for 5 straight years. I'm a big reader of CMHC's reports. They used to be quarterly, so I could track them quarterly. Drove the neighborhoods, found properties that were low relative to the rents that you could get for them, with a modest amount of work to fix them up, clean them up, and make them better. So that was my first jobs of just with condos and pre-sale condos and single units. And I convinced a bunch of friends to do it as well because I was doing it. So I was managing theirs mostly for free, but gaining experience from it, dealing with strata boards and condo committees. I sold them in 2.5 years later, kept them full, cleaned them up, sold them 2.5 years later, paid off our house and used that line of credit to buy our first property with my brother in Southern Ontario. So I was scouring the country for cap rates, high cap rates, and opportunities to work. And I didn't care where we were. If I could get there with WestJet or Air Canada reasonably, I would do that. And that's how we ended up in Windsor in 2000, end of 2009.
Hmm.
So that's where things got started, like everyone else, with a single unit, single doors, I like to say.
Sure. So let's talk about Windsor. Ontario isn't. I mean, for people that are out of province, I guess Ontario isn't the most desirable place sometimes because of the landlord-tenant laws.
Mm.
What made you want to invest in Windsor?
A couple things. I could just BC was online. There were landlord tenant laws were online, but it looks very similar. And I don't chafe under those. I mean, rules of the game are the rules of the game. If you're playing hurling or hockey or field lacrosse, that's the rules of the game. I'm all right with that. I just need them to be clear and consistent. So knowing what the rules are is totally fine. And we have no trouble working within them. And I actually was treated, I think, pretty fairly under the Ontario Rental Tenancy Act. Um, yeah, I didn't have a trouble with it. So that didn't bother me. It looked a lot like BC. And I've been doing BC rentals for by 9 years by then. Um, what attracted me was high cap rates. You had, when we were in Toronto, um, there's desirable markets. Like I loved Kitchener, Waterloo, and London looked really nice. And, to the east, some of those other places looked pretty good. And around the GTA looked pretty sweet. But there's a high threshold to get in. There's still quite a bit of value and they're pretty expensive. Windsor looked hard pressed. And my thinking at the time was we were buying things like 18 and 20 and 25 effective caps.
Wow.
I thought it hard to make a mistake there. So we bought some suites as low as $20,000 a unit. Now, your listeners are gasping, but these things were destroyed. Raccoons were living in them. They were substantially like they had our one building. We bought 69 units. I think 33 were on the rent roll, but only 20 were paying.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 13 people that are just riding the rent roll, not paying when
Yep.
we took it over. And there's more than 50% vacancy. You can't get insurance. You can't get financing on those terms. And it was wretched. Everything squeaked, leaked, was chipped, broken. Doors didn't work. No two doors matched on some floors. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was 69 units that we had to renovate. That's a lot of work. So buying them at 20,000 a suite off of the bank out of receivership was still a big gamble. And even then, you're still financing almost $2 million. You're burning $9,000 to $10,000 a month in principal and interest, property tax on top of that, and utilities. It's a tough go. But I thought my thinking was this: if you could buy them that low and fix them up, so apply capital and recapitalize the building, you didn't have to you didn't have to make massive amounts of money. You just had to be better than everyone else to be more attractive to fill your suites up, which wasn't hard. Um, and you just had to be a good operator. You didn't have to make miracles if you're buying that low. And that turned out to be the case. We were full within 2 years when the market vacancy rates in the 2011, 2012 were 16, 18% in Windsor. We were full with a wait list. I believed in, like, and I think our experience bore it out, that if you provided the community with a good product, that it was reasonably priced, well managed, and you treat people with respect, which are hallmarks of what we try to do, that we would be successful. The market told us yes, that worked, and we had good people. I have to credit our local managers, Joe, Terry, um, Robin, Linda, Dave. All those people did great work for us, managing buildings respectfully and treating our tenants really well. So we were able to buy over 300 units there. Our challenge was not opportunity. It was a little bit of courage within our partnership. I formed a partnership with my brother and two other Langley area realtors, my brother Don White and Bill Charney and Fred Rivers. Our challenge was, a little bit of courage, buying more properties when everyone else in Windsor was saying you're insane. Even the banks were saying, why would you buy this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're lending me money on it. Yeah, we're doing it, but I wouldn't do it on my own. Like, honestly, our banker said, I wouldn't do this, but our credit committee said, yes. So I'm lending you the money.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you live here. You can see this. Can't you see the value? No. Everybody told us we were stupid. Um, and, sometimes when you get on the plane and leave after a week of working in Windsor, you think maybe I am stupid because it's hard work. Anyone that's in the business knows how hard it is to renovate suites and turn them around and, evict tenants that are behaving badly. And by that, I mean, not that it's just they're difficult, it's they're committing crimes.
Mm-hmm.
These are violent places. That one building I referenced with the 69 suites, I found out from Barry Horrigan, who is the safety director for the Windsor Police Services, that address had 272 discrete individual emergency services called the year before we went there.
Wow.
The year after, it had 7, and 4 were related to the same incident: a
Right.
burning pot on a pan, burning pan on a stove. So there was lots of reasons why it looked terrible, but in reality, recapitalizing his building and bringing good management to him totally changed the streetscapes that we were involved with and changed the buildings. And it
Mhm.
became a very pleasurable experience. I adored my trips there. I made just under 100 trips in 10 years. So 10 a year for 10 years, 10 weeks. So I spent virtually 200 days, 2 years out of the last 10 years in Windsor, made lots of friends, made my partners lots of money. And I think we changed some communities. We turned crack houses into nice places to live for
Mhm.
families and seniors and students. So I'm really proud of what Fred, Bill, Don, and I and our team did. It was good work. And for that, I think the Canadian Real Estate Wealth magazine gave us an award in 2015 for the multi-residential
Mhm.
investors of the year, just based on that. And the years following were even better than 2015. The
Mhm.
results that we got. So that's how we ended up there, and that was just an awesome experience. So with my experience of going to University of Toronto and York and teaching in Toronto District School Board, and then working in Windsor, I got nothing but love for Ontario. I
Mhm.
want the Leafs to win the cup. I was a huge fan when the Raptors won, and I have nothing but love for Ontario.
Mhm.
So
Can we just dive into that a little bit? I know
yeah,
you did explain quite a bit about the project, but you get you said 69 suites.
in that one building, yeah,
Yeah, 69 suites. Half of them are vacant. Then you have another, I think you said 14 that are not paying rent, 13 or
yep,
14 not paying rent.
not paying
What
rent.
do you do when you take possession of a property like that? Where do you start? What's the process?
Um, yeah, the very first thing, I throw a pizza party in the lobby or any common area that they have. Pizza party, no liquor. That's a bad choice. I
Mhm.
did that once. That was a terrible idea. Um, but I throw a pizza party and I say, hey, this is who I am. Uh, it's not just good enough to get a letter from the lawyer saying the building is transacted and now send your rents to this person. I want to put a face on it and I want to tell them what my plan was. So I met with them. I even invited the neighbors. So across the street was I think it's a Lutheran or Methodist church. I invited them and their board because I'm sure they were bugged by this building that was just full of crime across the street from where they've got a children's program that was running after school program for kids. And I found needles all over our parking lot and our boulevard. I'm sure they had them across the street and they were concerned. Oddly, they didn't show, but I did invite them and all the other neighbors. I invited my prime contractors. I've already been working with different drywallers and plumbers. I invited them as well and said, here's Dave McAvoy. This is my plumber from Mainline Plumbing. He's going to be here quite a bit. So if something leaks, just tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, my faucet's leaking. My toilet doesn't flush right. Tell him it's going to be quicker than complaining and chafing and sitting in your room and not paying your rent because you're bugged about it. I want a building that works. So everything you tell me that's not working is good intel. Tell me everything. So it was 2 hours of complaints.
Mhm.
I just stood
Okay.
there. I'm like the Walmart person, just getting hammered with complaints about the guy who owned it before me, where they never had hot water for 7 months.
Mhm.
I mean, that's statute not allowed. That's criminal. It's immoral. But I let him go. I let him run. And yeah, and this thing, and this thing. I just let him go because people want to be heard. And I was a sounding board for it, but I wanted all that intel. What else didn't work? Because
Mhm.
the purchase process, there's no disclosure. We are buying as is, where is. And even if you're buying a normal building, the seller, unless they got, a level of commitment to honesty that I haven't seen much, they're
Mhm.
not going to tell you all the warts on their building. They're not going to tell you the shabby repairs that they made that put behind drywall, but the tenants will. So they told me everything. I took notes. I wrote everything down and I kept serving them pizza and soda pops. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about their sheet cake, chocolate sheet cake. Have a piece and tell me more what's wrong with this
Mhm.
building.
Mhm.
They also told me I was an idiot, that I was insane for buying it, that I should go back home. They told me lots of things. It was all good. So we had that meeting. It went for about 3.5 hours. Um, then I took the intel from that on yellow sheets and just started working. We started top down. Well, I started from the entrance in. We started on the boiler room, water supply, heating, hot water, made sure that it was heated. This August, so made sure everyone had hot domestic water. Started fixing doors so we had security of the building because you don't own a building until you can control the doors and locks.
Mhm.
We replaced all the doors, master keyed all the locks, installed the cameras. So the next month we were back. We drilled through 8-inch concrete. My brother and Bill drilled through 8-inch concrete with concrete bits, burned out bits, drilling so we put Cat 5 cable through and put cameras in every hallway, every common room, the laundry room. Fix the laundry room because that's the only amenity that we offered. So we fixed safety, the doors, the cameras, the laundry room, made sure the boiler worked, the domestic hot water was working. And honestly, that's how you take control of the building. The next day, I walked through everybody that owned a uniform. Did a police inspection, safety inspection. I invited the fire department in to give me a fire department update and inspection and a list of things I had to repair.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted all my dry standpipes inspected. But what I really wanted was blue uniforms with gold braid on them. That's the police services, and black uniforms with SWAT team or whatever with sidearms, the police. I want them in there. I want authority in there, and I want control of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And I want them to know this is different. So, sorry, I got a bit of a cold. So they knew that there was a different ownership in my accountability, that I was going to listen to them and take notes and respond to their concerns. Because in the end, I'm a customer service person, just like Walmart, no different.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm providing is what most people pay the most for every month is housing. I'm providing that, and they should have the same expectation when they go into Moxie's or Denny's that they're getting a quality product for the price that they paid. And if they're not, that's on me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to deliver that. And I told them I would deliver that. I laid out my 90-day plan. I said, you're going to see a lot of people in here and contractors. And I apologize for the dust. I apologize if there's a contractor standing in the doorway fixing the hinge and the closer on that door, but I want it secure. We're going to fix your intercom system. So that means it's going to be down for about 6 hours while they replace it with a new digital one that's going to phone your cell phone. So you can let your friend in by dialing 6, even if you're outside of the building. You can let
Mm-hmm.
him in.
Mm-hmm.
So I explained what I was going to do, and they could hold me to it. So when I didn't deliver on these things in 90 days, I knew it, they knew it, and I was under pressure, and all my contractors were to supply this. Day 2 was all uniforms. So I got a list from the police services, how I can make it safer, how I can improve my security lighting and windows. And I had a list from the fire department, Windsor Fire Departments, on all the things that didn't work, and I had all my fire department stuff tested and checked. And on that same day, did fire smoke detectors. Everything else went through it. So it was kind of a show of force in some ways, but also accountable. I'm going to be accountable to statute requirements in this city. So I am not afraid to have the police services and the fire department in there. So if later, 5 years later, and we're in a rent dispute and they call the health department, I already know those guys.
Mm-hmm.
I say
Mm-hmm.
guys, I'm sorry, that's gendered. I already know them. I've already talked with them. We've already been in there. They know my pest management treatment. They've seen it because I've handed it to them. They have a copy of my fire safety plan. So there's no surprises when they say my name, say we're having a trouble over at this apartment. This is my landlord. They go, I know that guy. I've met that guy. It's not a problem. So when
Yeah.
I go to our rental tenancy branch, I'm sitting there with our paralegal and sitting in front of the judges myself. I'm there. I'm accountable. I'm right central. Not everybody can offer that. I felt that was my moral duty to do. So uh, that's what we did. So what do those 14 people look like? Because I know you're anxious about those 14 people who didn't pay.
Mm-hmm.
I met with all of them, knocked on the door, met with them, chased them down, said, is there a problem here? I see you're on my rent roll. It says you're supposed to pay this. I haven't seen the rent from you. This is how you pay. Is there a question of how you pay? We offer cash, check, e-transfer. At that point, we were using a third party, which we were trying a third party app, which didn't work out very well. We offer these forms of payment. Can I ask you why you're not paying your rent? And they had a variety of answers.
Mm-hmm.
If they were on me, I fixed it. I said, we'll fix that. Show me. I'll have a guy in tomorrow, but I expect payment. You have to pay to stay.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other way. The money that you pay is what I use to fix this building. So to operate it efficiently and safely. So you need to pay or you can't stay, So using the Rental Tenancy Act, if they don't pay, I filed, and I'm relentless with that. If I choose to file, I finish.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll abide by what the rental tenancy branch or the adjudicator says, but if we choose to file, it's done. I just go right to the end of that and finish it.
Yeah.
And I tell them that, and I establish this is my practice. You can expect this from me. You can expect honest communication. If I say I'm going to file, I'm not kidding you.
Mm-hmm.
I filed right that day. I go leave right from your door. I scan it. I send it in, and it's done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can expect honesty from us, and that's what we did, and it served us well. Some of the people left. I have a theory on this. I mean, I think we have a consumer model in Canada around everything that provides us with great services, but also has a sense of a very empowered citizenry that expects quality services. So I looked around and said, this building is dark, it's unsafe, the collections are inconsistent, the services are inconsistent. These people lived without hot water for 7 months. Um, that's on the former owner. Um, if we act with consistency, we should expect consistent payment. If they don't, um, well, that's one of my requirements to stay here. There's three.
Mm-hmm.
You have to pay your rent, you have to live quietly with your other neighbors, and you have to not damage the asset. If you
Mm-hmm.
do those three things, I don't care who or what you are or what you do, you can live here. Like, we don't
Mm-hmm.
discriminate except for those three things. And that's just discernment. You have to pay, you have to play nicely, and you can't damage the asset. So
Mm-hmm.
with people, it was a matter of, you're damaging this suite. I'm giving you 24 hours notice, doing the inspection. I see all this damage. You need to make this right, or I'll make it right and charge you. You have to pay your rent. It's just as simple as that. Some chose to leave. They want a place where there's inconsistent collections. They want a place that's dark and dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
They want a place where their friends can slip in at 2 a.m,
Yeah.
or their customers can come and
Yeah.
go without a set of doors, without anyone seeing them, without cameras. I
Sure.
think half of those people that weren't paying, as soon as the cameras were up and running and they were proved to be real ones, not fake ones, they
Yeah.
just left, packed
Yeah.
up their stuff and are gone. And in one case, we had guys that were just living like a bunch of, dumbasses. Were partying for 4 or 5 days till their money ran out, and then they were panhandling the rest of the month. So I met with those guys, and this was in the second month, and they were guys. In this case, that's an accurate description. Um, and I had my laptop open, and I said, "Here, this isn't working for you. It's not working for me. You're four guys trying to live in a studio apartment. You're stacked on top of each other. You're fighting and partying all the time. Your neighbors hate you. You know what you could get for $600 a month? You could rent on the west side over by Sandwich Road. Um, you could rent a whole house, and then you can party every night.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no neighbors right next to you that are going to be bugged by you." I showed him this. I said, "Look at this. You could charge these other guys $200 a piece. For $800, you could put $200 in your pocket and charge these other guys rent, and you could be the landlord and control the place. Why are
Mm-hmm.
you hanging around here having me and my manager natter at you every day about noise? And all your neighbors hate you. Listen, if you leave today, I'll get my contractors to load up your stuff in our trucks and drive you over there. And if you
Mm-hmm.
need a reference, I can tell them you paid your rent on time. If he asks if you're quiet, I can't answer that. I
Mm-hmm.
can't say that you're quiet, but you do pay your rent on time."
Choosing the right mortgage product isn't always about the lowest interest rate. My name is Don Chen, mortgage agent with Pineapple Financial, and here are the two things you need to keep in mind. First, exit cost. Does your mortgage product incur a high penalty cost when you need to refinance or make any adjustments to your mortgage, or if you need to sell your property? Secondly, equity accessibility. If you need to access equity that has been built up, does your mortgage product allow you to do that freely and also in the most cost effective manner? These two things will put the most amount of dollars in your pocket and help you get ready for your next real estate project. I would love to connect with you for all your mortgage related questions. You can reach me at 647 961 3281, or you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at The Mortgage Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do you need? And I stuck my hand out to shake. And he crossed the distance halfway to my hand without even thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "He's 5 inches away from saying yes and moving out today."
Mm-hmm.
"What's 5 inches?" I closed the 5 inches, took his hand, shook his hand, and called my guy contractors up that were working on my other suites. Said, "We're loading up this guy's stuff. We're taking it over to this place. You make the call, rent that place." He did. He rented it and left. It was easy. It was not
Mm-hmm.
cash for keys. It was just, "I'll help you out.
Yeah.
You don't fit here. Just have an honest conversation, people."
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
fill this building up with students and seniors. You're going to get nothing but grief. Every time you get in the elevator, they're giving you a side eye. They're angry at you. They're muttering under their breath. You
Yeah.
can't live like that. Nobody wants to live like that.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to live like that. He just wanted to be left in peace to party with his friends.
Yeah.
We made that happen for him. That's another service I offered. I offered him out, a way out, elegant way to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we dealt with him. Some, it was just straight, "I'm just never leaving. I'm a persistent, old, rich, white man. I'm going to stand at your door and knock and ask for my rent over and over and over. You're just not going to get rid of me." So, and I can do this all day. And some of them just went, "I'm going to fold. I'm out. I can't
Mm-hmm.
stand this guy. He's just driving me nuts. He's going to complain about, I've got 5 dogs in here." One case, I'm exaggerating, but one person had 3 dogs and left them all day barking while they were out doing whatever they do. Dogs were going crazy in the apartment. It's 35 degrees outside. Those, I could have called SPCA. I told them. I didn't, but we had to open the doors and give those dogs water. You just need to leave. Dogs
Hmm.
can't stay on a fourth floor apartment. So they left too.
Yeah.
Um, that's a harder thing, but it's just wrong. I just felt it was wrong for them to keep dogs cooped up in a 30 plus degree apartment without water, barking
Yeah.
for hours.
Yeah. And those vacant units that you had, so about
Yeah.
half the building was vacant. Did you get your contractors in like immediately to start addressing those units? Did you do a full overhaul of the units or did
Yeah.
you just spruce them up a little bit?
They were so broken. Um, initially we thought we could spend, maybe $4,000 to $5,000 per suite, but in reality, they were so broken and used. It was upwards of 10 to 12,000 per suite. We started top down, and worked our way out floor by floor. So we'd clean up a whole floor, then go to the next one, clean up a whole floor, go to the next one. So at least the people attending to that floor wouldn't be walking through a mess every day and tracking drywall through the rest of the building. Um, there might have been more elegant ways to do it. The next building, we did it kind of vertically because we had to replace all the rises and water risers, supply lines, and the
Hmm.
sewer lines. They were galvanized and rotted right out, and copper that was so thinned out that they were leaking. So my partners, Bill and Fred, managed that reno, and they took it on vertically. It was only 3 stories high as a walk up. And in that case, we renovated move it units and moved people into renovated units, which they were super happy about
Hmm.
because their
Yeah.
places were wretched. And it gave us an opportunity to do a little bit of a slide puzzle, those little 9-piece slide puzzles with one piece missing. We'd move
Hmm.
one over, move two up, move one over, move two up.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. It was a bit of a Rubik's Cube. But they managed it really well. And we were able to replace all the vertical drains and water runs and restore functionality to that building. It was brilliant.
Hmm.
They did a remarkable job on that. And in 16 months, it was done.
Hmm.
It was hard, but we were able to do that. And the building, it looks great. So it was a bit of a challenge, but we did more. We renovated by the end of it, every unit, and some we did 3 times. They just got damaged. People would blow up and act outrageously, and then we'd have to renovate again. That's just
Hmm.
part of the deal. But yeah, we did all those suites over.
So
It's a
what
near
was the
condo quality.
yeah, what was the result of that project? Did you manage to finish it within your expected time frame? Did it take
No,
longer?
way
Um,
longer and way more money. I had to
yeah.
do. It's the only time I had to do a cash call with my partners. Um, we were about 9 months in, and we thought $300,000 would be more than enough, and it wasn't even close.
Hmm.
So about 9 months in, we had maybe one of the worst days of my career. Um, I had cameras on, so we're 3 hours different. So as soon as I get into work at 8, I'd turn on the cameras and be looking, and I just noticed pandemonium on the cameras. There's no sound, but you can see people running all over the place. And I saw my manager, running and grabbing documents and running out. And I thought, oh, what's going on? I phoned her, and there was a fire.
Hmm.
One of our residents, this came out after, there was no inquest, but this came out after, early in the morning, had been uh, salvaging bottles, took them over to the LCBO store, the liquor store, bought a 40 liter of rye, drank it, fell asleep on his sofa with a lit cigarette in his mouth, and the bottle of rye poured down his chest, and it's alcohol. The cigarette fell into the alcohol in his chest, and um, the fellow perished from his injuries.
Oh
But he
wow.
lit his suite on fire. The awful thing is, everybody saw it. He was on a ground floor suite. Um, they pulled him from the fire. He left a couple family members behind, and an ex-wife and a girlfriend. And he lived another day before he expired from his injuries, substantial injuries from the fire. It burnt the suite, scared the crap out of all of us. And this happened on Wednesday, maybe one of the longest days of my life. And
Hmm.
about 2 in the morning, my time. So the fire safety or the fire inquest that they do after every fire, especially when someone's injured, revealed that because they couldn't find the smoke detector. And my notes said that my managers had initialed and replaced the smoke detector with a brand new smoke detector and battery on November. And this is in February. They couldn't find it. It wasn't in place. They did find it. later that night. They took it to London to the lab and tested it. It had a brand new battery. It was a new smoke detector. It was functional. The tenant had taken it down, thrown it under the sofa.
Mm-hmm.
So his smoke detector didn't go off and didn't rouse him when he caught fire.
Yeah.
The ones in the halls that did, and the heat detectors in the halls. But that happened on a Wednesday. And on Friday night that same week, I had a partners meeting, and I had 9 other investment partners. And as well as myself, I was a investment partner and the managing general partner. And we needed more money, and I had to break it to him that we had this horrible fire in which Ray Ackrey lost his life and left heirs. It was awful. So a really terrible, terrible meeting.
Mm-hmm.
However, it went well, and we raised the money we required. I shared what the challenges were, what had happened, the uncertainty of, we were insured, but you don't know until you've gone through that process what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
There was still no clear information other than we met the statutes required for safety, but would there be some additional something? Could we have done more? There wasn't, but my partners were anxious, and on that basis and that our need for more renovations, we had another $125,000 of their money and another 130 of mine, since I was the person behind this and the general partner. So with that, that was enough money to finish the job, and we got it to refinance at the 3-year mark and substantially refinanced it and got our money out, or a giant chunk of our money out. And overall, the ROI on that, I think, ended up north of 30% annualized.
Mm-hmm.
And we sold it to a Ontario syndicate during COVID in May of 2020 for substantially more than we bought it for, almost 4 times what we bought it for.
Right.
So our renovations worked out. Our rent roll supported that sale, though. We had more than 50% were vacant. People were renting in there for $365 a month for a studio, $415. We maintained those rents as long as the people were in there. But with new suites, we put them in at market and rented to students and working seniors.
Mm-hmm.
So it totally worked out. But we needed to raise more money. I grossly underestimated the amount of work it would take to do that building. It was a real learning project for me.
For sure. What was the vacancy rate upon the sale of the property?
The posted rate in 2020, I think, was around 3%, 4%, 3.5%. We had lineups, we had wait lists. So we hadn't had a vacancy We hadn't had a vacancy if the suite was ready for more than 4 years, almost 5 years.
Okay.
So my manager, Joe Natty, had kept a wait list. People would come up to the building, ring him, and ask me put on the list. I'm looking for a studio or a studio plus. We're looking for a 1-bedroom. We had a handful of 2 bedrooms in the building for roommates. So he had a list. So he'd go down the list. So graduate students would set up in May and June to make sure they had a place in September because it was close to the new School of Engineering or the performing arts stage downtown, or they wanted to be in the downtown. And that's been typical of almost all of our buildings. We've had wait lists, people trying to get in, whether it's on Vancouver Island or Northern BC or in Ontario. That's a little slower in Saskatchewan and Alberta right now, but it'll come. It looks just the same as Ontario did,
Sure.
back in 2020, 2011.
Yeah. So I'm assuming based on the budget you mentioned, which sounds like it was somewhere in the ballpark of 500,000 or 600,000.
Yep.
I'm assuming you didn't have any structural issues in the building, anything.
No, that's a blessing. And you know what? We are so naive. I'd never worked with brick buildings before. This is a brick facade on a cinder block and steel frame. It was built started in 1927. Probably, like most of the construction in Windsor, was done with prohibition liquor money of what Windsor area residents were selling into Detroit and into the western states or the eastern states. So a bunch of buildings were started around 1926 to 1930. And then the Great Depression and the stock market crash of 1929 meant the ones that weren't finished were actually finished with relatively cheap materials. So this building was supposed to be a luxury hotel, and it turned into a luxury facade with a relatively cheap back end. So you can tell the facade has got this gorgeous herringbone um, and Tudor herringbone brick and Tudor finish, and then behind everything behind that is inexpensive 1930s linoleum, plaster and drywall. There's no intercom systems. There's no dumbwaiters. There's all the things that were hallmarks of buildings during the 1920s are missing because they didn't have any money. They didn't actually finish till 1931, and the parking garage that was supposed to go with it that we had drawings for was never completed. It was just an empty vacant space for the next 70 years. Right. So interesting history. But yeah, it was cheaply finished. Yeah, and that's when it's constructed. So we didn't know. So we got a real lesson on brick buildings, brick pointing, and how to work at 5 stories. Everything at 5 stories is way more complicated. You got fall arrest programs. You're using high ups. You're blocking the street. You're getting permits. 2 operators. Everything becomes way more expensive, and you'll get that with concrete towers. You have a small roof space, so your roofing costs are quite cheap, but you've got significant expenses in replacing windows or doing brick or structural repairs. It scared us off some other buildings, and I prefer, nothing more than 3 stories and wood frame construction like we have out west. I'm more familiar with that because I used to work in construction and roofing, and I'm more comfortable with that. Brick always made me anxious. It's tricky.
Yeah, yeah. And you said that this particular property was I guess, a power of sale or a foreclosure of some sort at the time.
Yeah.
How did you get your hands on the opportunity?
Well, I had made an offer on the building when the owner had it under contract with a local realtor, and the deal was frustrated because they couldn't produce any due diligence documentation. Their management was chaotic, as you could imagine, with half vacant. And when we did take it over, we did find a whole lot of casino chits and casino stuff in the building. No comment. I don't know what happened there, but it was just terrible management, and they hadn't paid their property taxes in 4 years. So they had broken their covenant with the bank for their financing, and the bank had taken possession of it because they'd fallen behind in payments. So I didn't know that when I made my first offer, that all this was happening in behind, that the bank was in the process of foreclosure. My realtor got wind of it and said, pull your offer and let's reset. Let's see what happens here. So we pulled our offer. He did a little bit of sleuthing and found out who the lender is, because that's on title. Approached the lender and said, listen, I've got a qualified purchaser, but given the light of what was now been revealed and the inability to provide clear financials, let's talk about what it would take for this qualified purchaser to take over. And I have to credit the bank in this case. Motor City Community Credit Union stepped up and provided financing for a very unlikely building. At 50% vacancy, you can't cover your expenses. That's not financeable. They wanted to at least recover their principal that was at risk, so they're on the hook a little bit. They took a little bit of faith in us. And here's the crazy thing. This is just lucky, just lucky. We're in town looking at buying this building, and we had purchased 2 other buildings before that, and a local business writer for the Windsor Star had written a profile on us. Someone had told her we were in town from Western Canada, buying multi-res in Windsor, and that was so weird that was a story. I've got it framed. My realtor sent it to me out of the newspaper. It's Ellen von Wagnerin writes up, what's the headline? Rental units attracting out-of-town investors. Like, newsflash. Nobody could believe this. These are the people telling us we're crazy. So she wanted to know why we would do this. Well, just as luck would have it, I'm in town to buy this other building, and this comes out in the business pages. And as we go in to talk to the bank, my partner Fred Rivers and myself go in to talk to the bank, we see this newspaper article is open with our pictures on it on his credenza behind his desk. He's been reading about these out-of-town investors.
Yeah.
It made us look like we were way more than we were. We're just 2 guys with limited funds, but it looked like we were something. This is where, the perception in the media actually kind of helped us, because He meets us and he turns around and looks back at that newspaper article, and I saw him do that. And then he turns around kind of quizzically and said, yeah, we get that from time to time.
Hmm.
What do we get? We don't get anything. But I kind of played up like, yeah, this happens. Sure. I was in the paper twice, both as a Boy Scout in 1977 and 1979. I haven't been in the paper for any other reason than that and this article. But it came at just the perfect time that we looked like we were more substantial, maybe, than we were.
Hmm.
And it met the bank's needs. They needed to put someone and their security and their houses and net worth on the security under that building. And we came at the right time. Right circumstances to pull this off. So Motor City Community Credit Union ended up stepping up as our financing partner in this, and as they did for a bunch of others. So I would say to investors out there, like, financing is a tricky deal. You can get great financing with no relationship, and maybe that works. But if you need relationship and you got a bit of a tricky plan or something that's a little riskier or something a little outside, you need relationship. You need people to believe in you. You need people that are willing to kind of go a little bit further, to check
Hmm.
this out and go a little bit further. Um, and I would say Fabio Cesca and the guys at Motor City Community Credit Union did that for us. He dug a little deeper, dug into who we were. I mean, the newspaper article helped, I got to admit. At least got us in the door and got us recognized as something. He did a little bit of deeper digging, wanted to know about our business plan. He became a friend and a business partner. Well, not a true business partner, but a partner as a banker, as much as a banker can be. And, a confidant and a source of ideas. Like, you have to know what the banks want. And we were able to meet what he needed and what
Hmm.
Motor City needed and his partners and the credit community needed. He was great help. Sorry, I'm looking up to the right here because where the newspaper article I've got up on my wall because it
Yeah,
just makes
yeah,
me laugh how
yeah.
these things can come together. But that's how we got financing for it. It was just kind of lucky, or maybe you're in the market enough times and throwing enough pitches, some of them land.
Sure.
Is that a mixed metaphor? If you throw enough darts, even if you're crappy, sometimes you're going to hit
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
dartboard, and occasionally you get a bullseye. Not
Right.
because you planned it, just because you planned to throw a ton. And
Hmm.
I think there's a lesson in there for all of us. I keep going back to that. You just got to keep pitching. Just got to keep
Oh, for
trying.
sure. Yeah, that's great. And I know you have, I'm sure, tons of other stories.
I
We
got too
really,
many. I'm so sorry.
no, that's okay. We really dove into this one, which I really enjoyed because it's an interesting. I've never actually heard anyone go through something like that where the building, was 50% vacant. You had all these issues, and you were able to do it with a relatively small budget, really, to turn that building around, considering the size. So
That was our
that's.
experience in Windsor. Every building we've bought out of distress. I just like to
Mhm.
joke. It's about the D's. It's out of debt, death, divorce, dementia, distress. There's some reason why someone will sell a building. It's not because it's overperforming. If you're getting a deal, it's because there's
Mhm.
trouble. And we're good at
Yes.
fixing trouble. So that's how it worked. All of ours were crazy stories to get them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that was great. And do you feel like there's maybe any final messages you'd want to share before we end things here?
Yeah, I suppose um, we do. I do a podcast with a couple of Ontario guys. One, he's actually out in Kitchener Waterloo. Advanced real estate investing talk. I like to. I don't make any money on it. I do this because I'm a former teacher. I'm that guy that will tell you when there's a when there's a great place to stay, a great hotel, a great restaurant, if there's a great deal on something. I believe in what we've done, the power of real estate, well chosen, well managed um, real estate to change the lives of your tenants, the streetscapes of the communities that you work in,
Hmm.
and the investment lives of the people that invest with you. Um, it is, some capital wise, it's kind of a high bar, but skills wise, if you're just a person of modest means and modest abilities, you can make a career in real estate, investing in real estate that is a benefit to the communities, is benefit to your tenants and to your family. Real estate, doing this work, has paid for my children's uh, dental work, all of our vacations. I drive a modest F-150. I have a
Hmm.
very simple life, but it pays for the food on my table. My wife and I support charitable and medical and developmental causes that are, important to us. And all that we do comes from the work that we've been able to do with our investment partners in real
Mhm.
estate. I know realtors and landlords and all that are kind of under fire right now because housing is so expensive in Canada. I don't, there are some bad players in the game that are manipulating markets and rent evicting. It is super rare. I just listened to Ian Hanneman sing on Cross Country Roundup on Sunday, to polling people about the high cost of housing and how it is to deal with rents and tenant courts and landlords. That is a rare
Mhm.
occurrence. When
Yeah.
you actually attend, like I have, hundreds of rent court hearings, it's not that. Most
Mhm.
people are well housed and treated respectfully by these agencies, and are. But if you're looking for affordable housing, sorry, two messages. Sorry, you said one, but I think a good life and a good business and a good benefit to community can be found in the work that we do, work that you're doing, work that your listeners are doing. It's honorable work. It serves our communities and our families well.
Mhm.
I would say I am interested in the housing crisis in Canada, and I've served in different boards and on different things. And I was a speaker at the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness in Toronto in November, talking from a landlord's perspective. There is a crisis in housing in Canada. It's really expensive. The land that we got it for free, and that substantially underwrote the cost of housing in this country and in all the Americas. If you compare it to Europe, housing and land underneath it is passed from generation to generation because the actual cost of housing is calculated into that, what it really cost. It cost blood and wars of succession and wars for 600 years in Europe to establish the cost and the value of land. We did hit that here through taking First Nations land
Mhm.
without seed, without deed, without reservations. Um, so that has made housing in Canada cheap, unnaturally cheap. We're now seeing the natural cause or the natural effect of the real true value of land calculated into housing, and
Mhm.
it's expensive. We will need government interference and government intervention to find affordable housing. The market cannot and will not be able to provide it. My contractors need to get paid. Plumbers
Mhm.
need to get paid. My managers need to get paid. There will not be cheap market housing anymore. The true
Right.
value of land is being calculated, and it's part of those rental costs.
Mhm.
So I think that's a big part of it. That would be my final lesson: is we're going to see those effects in the market. I
Absolutely.
think I
Yeah.
lost you.
It's uh, no, definitely something to consider here, Darcy. Um, I appreciate your time, and we'll be sure to include all your information in the show notes here. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Well Off Podcast. If you enjoy the show, then I'd really appreciate if you left us a review on iTunes and let us know your thoughts. In order for us to get a larger audience, it's really important to have reviews, so your support is extremely appreciated. And also, don't forget to share the podcast with your friends and family. Until next time, I'm George Almasri. Have a great day.